Okay. Well, for people joining this live stream, we are about to talk about a knotty problem in Wolfram language and in notebooks that we've been sort of putting off talking about for a while. I see that I have notes here from January 2018, but actually this question has a history that goes way before that. And the question is percent. And the bigger issue is when you have a notebook and you are doing computations and you use percent, you end up with a notebook where when you come back to it later, it's like, what on earth does percent mean? That is the question. And then, the alternative is people make up variables, hello equals 2 plus 2. Sometimes when they're working quickly, I'm a big offender in this, the variable names they make up are kind of terrible. And in addition, then there's still, state that they have to recover in their notebook if they want the thing to work. And if they created that in a different notebook, it's just a big mess. So let's try and refresh our memory, because I had an idea. My fundamental idea was that percent should bring up a suggestions tongue, so to speak, that offers you various things that percent might mean. But let's look at okay. So Path has some notes here. Percent in time.
Yeah. So just as background, this is a document that I put together, some brainstorming, and Michael and Itai participated in reviewing a version of this. But these are brainstorming concepts. I'm not necessarily wed to anything here, but some stuff to talk about, I think.
Okay. I mean, we also talked about, in the modern world, every cell has a UUID, correct?
Yes.
And so, in principle, something that refers to a cell could refer to the UUID of that cell.
Well, and in fact, it's on our roadmap, and also mentioned here, but it's on our roadmap that we are going to change the full form of notebook object and cell object, which right now just use internal IDs that don't persist between sessions, between front end sessions.
But where is that ID? Is that in there?
It's just the first argument of cell object and notebook object, or the sorry, it's the first argument of cell object, of notebook object.
I think Stephen is asking where is the ID in the cell, and it's not shown.
No. We don't show it in the show cell expression.
How do I get the cell object for %207, for example?
You can do cells bracket gives you the. There you go.
Don't we also have a right-click copy as cell object?
Maybe we added something and I forgot. Yeah,
we do.
Okay, yeah, we do. I'd forgotten about that. I'm certain I added it too, and I forgot.
Okay, so there's the cell object. That is a junior UUID, basically.
Well, it's an ID which is only unique for this session.
Right, so it's a pointer into memory or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But so in general, we could end up with a UUID there, which we can readily tell, is it resolvable or not within that notebook?
Yeah. And this is already planned, already mapped out. We just have to get it implemented. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one possibility is that percent refers to, in space, in effect, a particular cell object.
Well, I don't think percent literally.
No, but I mean, what I'm imagining
a conceptual percent object.
Yes.
Is what Itai wants you to say.
Right. What I'm imagining is you type percent and you get a pull down here that shows you iconized versions of certain previous cells in the document, like the most recent. So to my mind, it's like, show iconized, cells, including the most recent kernel cell, the cell immediately above you. Those are the two most obvious ones.
But by the way, though, I mean, presumably you don't want to actually show, you don't want to actually make it the iconized cell because you might have some massive thing. You want to make an iconized version of like this answer data thing on the left or something like that.
Well, I think there are two ways you could go, and I enumerate both as possibilities if you read farther down. One is you can have a reference, so the output to the previous input, and then if you reevaluate that input, then you'll get the reference will of course automatically update. But the other possibility is you might want to do something equivalent to copy output from above, but in iconized form. And I think both are valid. Do we want to present both choices? When having people try to figure out kind of more choices, what exactly do I want to do? That might be a bad thing, but both are valid things to potentially want to do.
Hold on. So I'm getting up to speed here. I mean, one of the things that you're suggesting is one of the outcomes is, okay, so the question is, what is in the notebook?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and one answer is an iconized expression, which is, in other words, i.e., a burnt in for all time version of whatever you got,
Absolutely
whatever
correct.
the result was.
Yes.
Okay. Another
Right.
possibility.
This is the percent by value suggestion, basically.
Right, which
As
is,
opposed
I
to by
mean,
reference.
right, which
Are
that
you seeing that written here somewhere? Because that's a good characterization. Percent by value.
I didn't call it percent by value, but that's an excellent name.
Right, and that already exists. That's Shift Command L.
Except
Right.
that it doesn't auto iconize for you.
Okay, it doesn't auto iconize, sure.
Right. So that is basically, so what you're saying, that's equivalent to Shift Command L adding auto iconization, with auto iconization added.
Yep.
Yeah.
Only if the output actually appears in the notebook. If the output wasn't suppressed.
I was just going to say there's a little bit more auto stuff around that we may not want to dive into immediately, but has to do with determining whether or not that Command Shift L represents a complete expression. And I can imagine ways to kind of factor through that, but that's maybe diving too deep for the moment.
Yeah, and also just as a pedantic detail, I think Command Shift L actually copies the line above, regardless of whether it was the last thing evaluated.
That should not be the case.
Oh,
I think it is the one.
Wait, I'm sorry.
It is the case.
I thought you were saying something else. It copies the positionally previous output cell.
Right. So this is,
which may not be immediately above. That's what I got confused by.
Right. Statement. So this here is copies positionally.
Yeah.
Right. So there's okay. So wait a minute. So there's okay. So there's two things. There's the destination of percent, the what percent is making, and there's where it comes from. Right. Mm-hmm. Those are two different questions.
Yes. Agreed.
Okay. So what percent is making?
Yeah, that's four permutations, one of which we implement now, and three of which I discuss in my proposal.
Okay, all right, which we should read. Where percent is coming from? Okay, so what percent is making could be a iconized expression, iconized burnt-in expression, or it could be a well, actually, there's several things it could make. I mean, it could make...
Well, it's a reference of some sort.
Yeah, reference to something. And it could be a positional reference. It could be, I could imagine something...
out of in.
Yes. Okay, but now the other possibility, which has come up in things like dataset, is out-of-core storage.
Why would you want to use percent for out of core storage? I mean, it seems like there are other, if nothing else, use like local object or something like that. There are a lot of different ways of representing that.
No, I understand that. But if you want to say, take this thing, and when this notebook comes back to life again, have it refer to the same thing. You might
so by out of core, you mean in the somewhere stored in the .mb file, though?
I'm not
right?
sure. I'm not sure. Or it could be in the cloud or anything. I mean, it could be in any persistence location. Question mark. Store the value of percent in any persistence location. I mean, that may or may not be sensible, but it seems like
well, so that's related to something that I wasn't prepared to discuss, but something which has been on our back burner for a while, which is this notion of having assets which are not in your notebook, but which you can reference to and typeset in the notebook.
Right, I understand. Orbiting assets.
So arguably, though, for this application, this is equivalent to iconizing it.
If it's going to be in the notebook.
Yeah, unless it appears more than once.
Well, that's an interesting point. I don't think we should worry about that case for this. I think I'd actually read what John had written here. Okay. Offer to replace it with a summary blog that survives the session like iconize. And by the way, the summary blob, once you make it, could have an iconized version of the expression in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that as being part of the metadata.
Right. To remind you what it is.
Yeah.
So what you would see is something very similar. I mean, iconize has been a nice, successful thing. So what you would basically see is something that has this, but an enhanced version of iconize. I mean, iconize itself could. So that's another issue. Is displaying iconized expressions. I mean, iconize itself could do better than that in terms of displaying what that expression is like. I mean, we could look in the first approximation, we could just use iconize's mechanism.
Sure.
Now, by the way,
the trickiest thing around this is just having a technology which can produce a reasonable thumbnail in a guaranteed portion of time. You don't want it to end up inadvertently doing like 10 seconds worth of work producing a thumbnail.
Right. So that comes up in our web, also for cloud notebooks. Okay, the exact same problem. And I'd like to point out to you that
it's a little different because there you're trying to thumbnail the entire notebook as opposed to an expression.
Let me show you something which I think has been surprisingly successful. I don't actually even know how it was done. He says, now seeing something that failed. Why did that one fail? But look at these. Aren't these lovely? Why did these fail? Well, having said that, they mostly work beautifully. And I think this is a pretty simple heuristic that's finding these things. No comments. Do you know how this works, John?
I don't know how that thing specifically works, but I'll just point out that, for example, when dealing with a notebook, one of the problems is, you're dealing with a physically sized thing. So maybe it captures the top, 600 points at a certain width. But then what if you have a cell that starts 400 points down, and then the cell's like a mile tall? And we have to have enough smarts to realize, we don't want to try to bitmap or even draw that entire thing.
Can't we just use short to get some? Can't we use short?
Well, no, not for notebooks. See, short is a thing you can do for expressions, but you can't do it for notebooks. That's why I'm saying the notebook thing is actually a bit different from the expression thing.
Okay, fine. All right, okay. But so anyway, so we'll get some display there. All right. Syntax highlight percent, which is probably no longer valid. Oh, I see. You're saying a percent that is dead How do you indicate that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good
Yes.
point.
So in the same way that we update
the ins, yeah,
the ins and outs that are no longer relevant, we update those, and we could do the same thing with a legacy percent.
I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, a legacy percent is very dead. I mean, it could as well.
Well,
be.
I mean, it's not totally without controversy, because a percent may be intended to be, if you evaluated this entire notebook in sequence, it would be a valid percent.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's look at this thing here. Percent in space. Okay. Some input cells generate multiple output cells. Oh, for goodness sake! What does percent even do?
I know you wish that were not the case, but yes, I knew you would. Yeah,
I mean, this is one of many reasons why it's sort of a bad idea.
Yeah. But I think we can. I think we can still do it. I mean, it's a simple offset to say, the second output of the input cell. And of course, you can still edit the input cell to change that. But
what are you proposing? That it be out 7,2 or something?
Well, I'm proposing that the full form, which this made up thing based on a name I don't really like very much, but this full form would basically, first of all, it would reference the input cell, not the output cell, and second of all, it would just give you an integer offset, saying the first output, the second output, the third output, or whatever.
What is this thing? What is this answer data thing?
So this is the reference. This is the anchored reference. It's basically saying it's a proxy for the output cell generated by that input cell.
Okay. I see. So when it's referenced relative to an input cell.
Yes.
Because what's the point of referencing? If it's referenced relative to an output cell, is that obvious? I mean, because you might rewrite the outputs. No, that's not obvious at all. You might want both references, right? You might want reference the output of a given input cell, or you might want to say reference a particular output.
Except that if that output cell is regenerated, it will no longer have the same UUID.
Yeah, that's a property, is you lose your UUID when you delete and recreate the output cell, and that's not something that I'm going to give up lightly.
No, I understand that, but so what would be the issue? So you're saying that it's pointless to reference an output cell. You might as well, if you want it, it's not going to be stable.
Exactly. That's precisely what I'm saying.
Okay, so then because the input cell,
you can't guarantee the input cell is stable either. But
okay, what do you do if the input cell
based on shift enter evaluation?
No, I understand, but what do you do if the input cell is deleted?
So in that case, the typeset thing that you're showing would update to indicate that its reference is no longer valid.
Okay, so if
the
input cell is deleted,
and then it would evaluate to something, I don't know, a failure object or something. I don't know how it would evaluate, but it would visually show what's going on.
It will wilt. The output icon, the output blob will wilt. Whatever that means.
Yeah, and I think in that case we can provide an interface if you want to retarget it to something that is valid. We can provide that interface.
So in other words, the input cell is deleted. The output blob will wilt. Okay, together with but.
Oh, by the way, here's a clever thing too. If you cut and paste an input cell, the first thing that you pasted will have the same expression UUID.
I see. I understand. So if, did I spell that right? Should that be a spelling word?
I think it probably should be. Oops.
Is it a Scrabble word? No.
I'm looking it up right now. I think it is. I think I've seen it before, but yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah,
so can somebody send that in? Path, could you send that into spelling?
Yep.
Okay. So if the cell is quotes moved by copy paste.
By cut and paste. It has to be cut.
Yeah, okay. Not copy, I see. By cut paste. It will preserve its UUID.
Yeah, and that's already true today. I don't need to
but now
change
if it's
anything for
moved
that.
by copy, if the cell is copied, it's the old version, it's the old copy that is the reference.
It basically the reference never changes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the original that's the reference.
Yeah.
I mean, as part of the retargeting, we could try to see if that cell, do we know if that cell was repositioned somewhere else?
Well, I mean, we can if that's useful information. It's not clear to me that we need to know that it moved.
Okay.
But if it's useful information, yeah, we can figure that out.
Okay. All right. So then
we can also, if the cell was moved by, say by a destructive operation, like by say copy paste delete, but was not otherwise modified, we might be able to hunt down its identical twin. We have ways of doing that too.
Fair enough. With hashes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. Fine. I mean, hunting for a twin. Hunting for the twin of a cell.
Which would at least, in the retargeting interface would, we could pop that up to the top of the list of choices in the retargeting interface.
Yep. That seems like a good idea. Okay. So let's just go down these more suggestions. Okay. Offer an option to freeze %. What does that mean?
Well, so maybe it was a reference, but now you want to lock it in for some reason.
Right. You finally got the output that you exactly wanted. So now you want to do the by value rather than the by reference.
So yeah, I mean, you could either do this the first time out, or you could do it, after you've iterated the notebook for a bit.
So you're saying that the % blob would have, in this % blob, it would have a pull down that says, for example, that the auto suggest or whatever it is would include freeze this value or something.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think auto suggest. I think that would be, some, I don't know, some button inside the blob.
Okay, so is that analogous to the kinds of things that are in dataset where it says kind of, don't refer to an external file, store this in the notebook? Is that sort of an analogous thing?
Yes, I think it is.
Right, or maybe the store now button that you have on both data sets and also large sparse arrays. I mean,
okay.
It's not exactly the same thing, but it's basically...
Yeah, right, but it might have the same design treatment.
Yeah. Okay.
We got a number of suggestions on the live stream here, which I want to look at in a second here.
Oh, I hadn't been scrolling my chat view, so I thought there was nothing.
Is it reasonable? Okay, so the next question you had is it reasonable to support roll-up? I see. Where yeah, I mean, it would be lovely to have a roll-up.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain if roll-up is well defined, but it might be. I haven't really thought it all the way through.
Well, I mean, roll-up with multiple %. So in other words, resolve. So this is a % by value. Could it have roll-up?
Well, I mean, recall that the predictive interface, what it does with rollup is it actually squashes, quote, squashes cells together. I mean, it takes, say, a sequence of 4 cells and replaces them with a single
I
cell.
know, but it only does that if those cells were created by the predictive interface. So it's very...
Exactly.
No, I mean, here, the obvious thing to do... So one sense of this doesn't make any sense at all, because you're taking that 17 and you're saying, you know, if I'm iconizing this, I'm iconizing that. I don't care where it came from.
Yeah.
The question is, am I iconizing the operation? So what you want to do here is to iconize. It's really a percent by reference that is really the interesting case of this. What is happening to those cells? Okay, so this is a percent by reference, where what would happen is that it would say, basically, it would say, you know, reference squared plus 1, right, is what you would put in there.
Well, or it might roll it up all the way. It might literally have a 2 plus 2 quantity squared plus 1.
Yeah, but by the time it does that, why isn't it just using 17? Oh, because it's I see, because it's unevaluated.
Because you might be wanting to get rid of input cells.
Yeah, I understand. But one thing we haven't been addressing here in this iconization is you might want to iconize. I see what you're saying. So this is effectively iconization of input as opposed to output, right? So one thing you might want to do is basically say out 203. That's what you're storing, the value of out 203. You might also want to be storing the reevaluatable in line there.
Yeah. And you know, this is one of those things that where, you know, rollup is a little weird, because rollup, you know, takes something that actually used outputs and reconstructs it from the constituent inputs. And, you know, that's a little head scratching, and maybe people don't think about it that much in the predictive interface, but here maybe it's a little too head scratching. I don't know.
Well, look, I think the main issue is you might want something where this thing says you now plus, you know, whatever it is. It's something when you reevaluate it, it will change. Possibly because it's capturing other variables and things like this.
Yes.
So,
or it could have a random in it or something.
Right. So basically this says, so wait a minute. So the interface is either you are storing, okay, so the burning in interface, you know, the burn-in interface could either be burn in the output or burn in the most resolved version of the input.
Yeah. This would be a good time for me to emphasize that although I listed, you know, these ideas, I'm not a believer that we should take all the ideas. I want to have all the ideas out for discussion, but I'd like the interface to be more focused on the stuff that we think is really important. So.
Okay, hold on. There's a bunch of interesting suggestions on our live stream here. I just want to finish going through these, and then I'm going to go through the live stream ones.
Okay.
Okay, what to do if the output is no longer available and the output cell doesn't contain... Yeah, well, that's the wilting idea.
Yeah.
Type in percent to get a pop-up.
Although we did discuss, and I forgot to mention it here, but we did discuss the possibility of if it's obtainable by some means, you know, like, for example, it's not in the notebook, but it's still in the kernel session, and we could figure that out. You know, for example, the output cell has a store now button that would still work if you just pressed it. Well, we could kind of automate the pressing of it.
Yeah, I understand. What happens if the output we reference has dynamics?
And here, I think Michael was concerned about how we thumbnail things.
I see. Then we punt on the thumbnail if we have to.
Yeah, one of the things which Michael seemed to be arguing for, he should speak for himself, but seemed to be arguing for was maybe like another input form variant, you know, something that typesets graphics but not dynamics.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure. It's just a scenario that I could see occur.
Right. You mean a Oh, I see. Okay. Right.
Like manipulate is the prime example that might depend on some outer definitions that are changing.
Indeed. But so what are you proposing? You're proposing...
No, I don't have a proposal. It was just one thing that we should keep in mind for this. I don't have a...
Okay, so comment. Okay, we got a bunch of comments here from Steve on the live stream, commenting that in Excel we can name cells and name ranges. Could we name cells and a contiguous range of cells? Why would you?
I'm familiar with the Excel feature. I hadn't thought about it for the notebook front end. The principal issue is the issue of stability in regards to generated cells, which, of course, I'm trying to solve.
Well, let me give you an example of a bizarre thing that one might want, and I've definitely wanted this, is a cell sequence to list. So in other words, given a sequence of cells, can you select a sequence of cells? Yeah, that's kind of weird. Can you select a sequence of in-out cells and harvest the out cells into a list? So it's like a notebook import inside the notebook.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how valuable that is, but it's a
so the way programmatically, the way you would do that right now is you could apply a cell tag to all of the input cells you care about. The cell tags will auto copy from input cell to output cell. So so the output cells will get that cell tag, and then you can use notebook import selecting on a cell tag.
Yeah, that's kind of complicated. I mean, if we think this is a useful operation. And actually, I have to say, I would have used it a bunch of times. I mean, this is kind of I hadn't really thought about it in this way, but I select a bunch of stuff in the notebook, I right-click, I get something which allows me to essentially do an in-notebook import. All right, anyway, that's the best I can do to make sense of that. Okay, Mohammed is commenting, since percent consumes memory, it might be useful to know how much memory all of this stuff is consuming.
Well,
yeah, I mean, that was more of an issue back in, do you realize, by the way, we almost have a virtual machine that will allow us to run version 1.2. That may seem like a non sequitur, but back in those days, right, we used to have a memory monitor right in the notebook to make sure you weren't using too much memory. Maybe I'm spoiled by having a machine with about 1 terabyte of memory or something. But it seems to be less of a problem these days.
So as far as the memory consumed by the notebook, that is something that we can get our hands on today, although I'm having a little trouble getting it to work on my Windows development front end here. But it's information that's available in the notebook history dialog.
Yeah, I know. I don't think anybody uses it, but it is there. And for example, one thing that I often want to know is, I've got this notebook, can I send it an email? And usually I experimentally just try and put it in my email and it complains if it's too big. But I also do know that I can go look in the notebook history, but it's certainly a nuisance to do that.
Now, of course, the interesting thing about the notebook history is that it's, the numbers there, they have a relationship, obviously, but it's not the same. That is, RAM usage. That is not on disk usage.
Why does it pink? Why did that pink?
Because, as you say, it's not a feature that gets used all the time. So there are bugs. But also, the kind of more important thing, which I'm seeing, and we should fix this, is yes, that's off the bottom of the screen, and I can't get it to resize or scroll on my system either. That's just it's a little embarrassing. We should just fix that. I think it's easy to fix.
Okay.
Parth, can you file this for Larry? I think it should be pretty straightforward for him to fix.
Yes, I will file it for him.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know what's causing the pinking, but somehow it's transiently pinking.
Yeah. that may be harder to fix, but the cell statistics not being able to be viewable, that's easy.
Okay. All right, let's keep going here. So we're saying, I mean, in terms of memory usage, it could be the case that we want a notifier. If you're going to iconize, well, when do you care? I'm not quite sure when to notify you about memory usage.
Well, I mean, we don't need to throw something, throw up a dialogue or a notice or something like that. We can just have, it can be just something like, like a little bar or whatever, that gets, bigger or redder or something as it consumes more memory.
I don't know. It depends on how much memory is available. Honestly, I think that's a 30-year throwback. And I'm well, okay. Anyway, I think it's hard to know how much memory is available.
Well, I mean, of course, the thing which does Iconize already do this? I mean, we can certainly have it in the metadata.
Oh, it's there. It's there. I mean, it says right there. It says byte count 9.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe that's the answer to the question.
Okay. Next point. Brian says it would be nice to be able to select a range of cells and freeze them with respect to percent. Oh, I see what you're saying. So in other words, take a range of cells which have percents in them. That's a good idea.
And fix all the percents.
Right. So in other words, instead of, that's a good idea. So in other words, this would be percent bulk percent manipulation.
Yeah. That would be straightforward.
Yeah, so the right-click menu probably. In right-click, do the same operation on all percents in a range.
Yeah.
E.g. iconization. So in other words, what that would be is, just like we can say iconize this expression in the right-click menu, we'd be able to say iconize, okay, so, right, on all percents in the range. Good idea. Let's see. SWSH is asking, can we have in boxes as well as in and in string? That's an interesting idea. Why do we not have that? Why didn't we have that 20 years ago?
So in string will support boxes. I don't remember if I put that in 12.1.1 or if it's only in 12.2, but now I'm glad that I noticed this bug and actually bothered to fix it, because at least one user out there has apparently noticed.
So what is the bug? The bug is that
that in string was just completely ignoring standard forms. Well, basic standard.
So if I do this, for example, then and you're saying if I then say in string %214, I mean in string 214.
Oh well, you're running a 12.2 presumably.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm running. What am I running here? I thought I was running a regular 12.1. No, I'm running a 12.1.
Oh no! I was thinking. I was confusing echo and in-string. Yeah, no. So in-string supports boxes, and has for some number of years.
Yeah, like 20.
Right.
Okay.
So then I'm not sure what.
Okay.
So it's a weird name.
Right.
Yeah, it's a weird name,
really
but not right. But it isn't a. I mean, arguably, we should have a different name there, because that is super confusing.
Actually, that out215 is a string.
Oh, that's scary.
Which is probably not what you would want.
So it's so.
Wow. Just wow.
Probably because there's some requirement in the kernel that in string has to be a string.
Okay, so that's crazy. So in boxes would in fact make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, or there could just be a single thing that gives you the source of the in, whether it's a string or boxes. You're not going to have two different sources for the same input.
So you're saying in source,
or
for example.
Or some better name, but yes.
Okay. give whatever form of source was for. Okay. Okay.
Right. Well, if we actually, I mean, I would want to think some more about this, but if we had an in source, I'd probably want to deprecate in string.
Yes.
We wouldn't take it away, but it would be silly to have these two that are so similar. And
No, I agree. I think it's silly. I think in string is kind of, look, in string is relevant for command line interfaces, quite relevant there, where it really is just strings.
mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure.
But if we have a good name, then that name will work, and we just like Itai says.
No, I don't agree. I think we need the in string for the command line interface case, even when sometimes it has to do crazy stuff like this, because it really does need to be a string, and lots of crazy things will break if it isn't.
I'm not suggesting changing in string. I'm suggesting that if we add an in source, which is in string when you're in a standalone kernel and boxes when you're in $notebooks, that it, that's really the only one you need, and in string will be sort of deprecated.
I.e., that we obsolete it in the documentation, not that we take it away.
Okay,
right. Yes.
Cross that bridge later. I'm not sure I necessarily agree. Okay, another suggestion from our live stream, a suggestion about using @ equals, % @ equals cell number. I don't think we need that because we already have % cell number. Oh, that's a reset mechanism. Yeah, that's complicated. Okay, a suggestion that in -1, hold gets the unevaluated expression. Don't we have a mechanism for that? Oh, we don't have a mechanism for that right now. Do we have a mechanism? So this is, okay, so this is enhanced in handling.
Right. The mechanism for that is in of number / down values of in.
Oh, for goodness sake. That's horrifying.
It's the language. I mean, I don't think it's that horrifying, but it's not super convenient.
That's a decent idea. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be sensible, unless we're trying to use these sub cases of so then we've also got enhanced out references, which I don't understand at all. What happens? Okay, wait a second. If I have a thing, this absolutely horrifying thing where I'm doing this, I hate this. Okay, so those get 2 different out numbers.
That's right.
So % is 6 and percent is 8.
And 2 different in numbers as well. You just don't see it in the interface.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's no reason to use okay. So there's no reason to use a second argument of out. Okay, let's keep going here.
Maybe you should be able to see it in the interface. I mean, maybe.
I think that would help me. It would help me a lot. It would help me a lot if it broke it into separate cells. I don't really see why it doesn't.
No, anybody who actually uses this feature would hate that.
You breaking it into separate cells would have people with pitchforks at my door. They're not going to be at your door. They're going to be at mine. But but I think considering the possibility of having a multi-label there that lines up,
because I had no idea that there was a separate inline there.
Yeah,
that would really help me to understand that it did 2 evaluations and which part of that thing produced which output.
It would take a bit of effort for me to figure out how to do that well, but it seems like a decent idea.
All right. Okay. Let us record that. Parth, you are noting all these things, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Ethan is bemoaning the fact that the predictive interface is not customizable.
Chris Carlson is here.
Chris, can you comment on that? I just don't know. I mean, syntax coloring is also only a little bit customizable, although we hope it will become more so.
Yeah, this has come up in the past. There are lots of complexities in the way the predictive interface works, and trying to simplify that to something that users can deal with is the issue.
Complexity because of things like timing issues and so on. Is that
There's
right?
all sorts of stuff, all sorts of things, yeah.
Name 3.
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean,
well, the timing issue is certainly one. There have been bugs where, the front end freezes. It's reported to me, and then I look into it, and no, it's actually because the predictive interface took 10 or 20 seconds to figure out its stuff.
The predictive interface has semantic types. It does this typing thing based on the types. It has rules that decide which rules fire.
Right.
It's involved.
I mean, it's quite complicated. No, I know it's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, that is the major issue. That's why we have not yet made it available to users. I mean, maybe there's some simplified version that we could do that doesn't give you all the flexibility. That might be a possibility.
Okay, so the comment that from the live stream yesterday, we talked about these customizable themes for evaluation and display. And why can't the suggestions bar be part of that? That's a reasonable idea. That is a reasonable idea. I mean, that was yesterday that was in the context of being able to wrap this elementary evaluate thing around to get for elementary math purposes. But I don't know, what can you do with the style sheet with respect to the suggestions bar? Does it have a lot of control there?
All of the fonts are controllable via the style sheet, but the backgrounds and such are not.
But what about the actual functionality of the suggestions bar?
So in principle, it's possible to control the actual functionality. In practice, there are no such controls I'm aware of today.
That's
okay.
That's my understanding too.
So I mean, the question is, putting more investment into the suggestions bar and having it be. I mean, that is the obvious place to control it, is from the style sheet with a theme type mechanism, because we could imagine in the notebook toolbar having some kind of theme for having the idea that came up yesterday was themes for evaluation themes displayed in the notebook toolbar. So, for example, the elementary math evaluation theme, and we could imagine putting into the evaluation themes things about the suggestions bar too.
So, well, I wasn't there yesterday, so I don't know exactly what was discussed. In general, I will say that, we have been thinking about themes a lot, but there's kind of, some proto-theme stuff that just a little bit that lives in the default style sheet right now. And you see bits and pieces of it poking out through presenter tools, but there's some foundations that need to be firmed up before we can really go whole hog on themes, I think.
Okay, Sandro on the live stream is commenting that he would like some mechanism to make sure that huge expressions don't get stored in out. $max history size or some such other thing. That's very similar to the what do we have for dataset? We have a mechanism there for what is automatically stored.
$notebook inline storage limit.
So maybe we should use that maybe that should also apply to %. Is there any good reason it doesn't? I guess it's not notebook inline. It's not notebook inline storage. It's basically.
Well, I mean, the current % doesn't take up any, right? It takes up one character's worth of storage.
Right.
No, in the notebook. But the question is whether you're storing, whether that outline.
Well. So in the cases where % is effectively an iconize, then then
Doesn't make
yes,
any
we
difference.
could.
Yeah.
Well, well, no. It does make. I mean, that's the case where it makes the difference. But I mean, we could produce an object, I suppose, that works this session and doesn't work in future sessions, and then telegraph that, somehow through the user interface.
No, I think the point being made is, when do you store out 17? When do you even bother to store it? If out 17 is 100 megabytes in size,
yeah,
and let's say that what I had done was I'd said, well, I see. The point is that if I say U equals 100 megabyte expression, right, semicolon.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, I don't understand why you'd ever do this, because by the time you can't see it and you didn't set a variable, if you set a variable to it, you're storing it anyway. Oh, I see what could happen. Yes. Look, this is the case. This is the bad case. You do this, and that gets an outline, and that gets an outline. And so you've actually stored that expression twice, even though you thought you were only storing it once because it was only in the U. See what I'm saying?
No.
No.
Storing it where?
In down values of out.
Yeah, right. It's being stored in the down values of out. Right.
No,
so if I do that,
no, it's not. The down values of out will be, or no, I guess down values of out will have it. Yes.
Yeah. Right. That's the bad case.
And it's not auto shared.
It doesn't matter if it's auto shared. I mean, look.
Well, it does matter if it's auto shared, because if it's two references to the one bad thing.
No, but it's not. It's not. I'm imagining this is, look, here I say equals random integer, 10 million. Okay, 10 comma a million. Then I do the same thing again here.
Well, yes. In this case, it's two different objects. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I don't understand what the.
Okay, so here's my point is. My point is the byte count of %222, right? Is there, and so is the byte count of %223. But the point being made by Sander is, he says, look, I'm never going to refer to %222. Don't store it for me.
Well, then set history length to 0.
No, but he doesn't want to do that. He says he only wants to do that. He wants his history when he can have it. But if he's generating, gigabyte expressions, he'll say, look, I'm just not going to worry about those. See what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, one could imagine a dollar history storage limits.
Yes, that's what's being suggested here. Max history size was the, max.
Well, the default should certainly be infinity if we introduce.
Of course. But I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask for, is something which, in a case like this, because I'm sure I've had sessions where I basically did this. And I didn't really think about it, and the thing was just, using hundreds of gigabytes of memory in the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why you have a terabyte of RAM on your machine.
Yes, although I'm wondering if this is really true. It might be half a terabyte. I'm not sure. Okay, so
I'm not impressed anymore.
Yeah, I know. I was okay. Let's see. Comment. Okay, total in megabytes rather than number of history entries. I see what you're saying. So I see. So one suggestion here is limit. We did talk about this at one point. Limit not history length, but history storage size.
Yeah. And of course,
what do you throw out? It's like a cache.
Yeah, and of course there are two ways you could do that. You could, you could do it sequentially, or you could limit the size of any one thing that goes in history.
Yes, that's the point, right? But so I mean that's the, and I think the better thing to do is limit the size of any one thing, because I think the other thing is too complicated. I mean, otherwise you fill up your history storage, and you've got a tiny little thing, and it says, "Oh, sorry, you're full."
Yeah.
Right? And you don't know what to throw out of the cache.
Right.
Yeah, I have to think about this in the case of multiple undo, because it's you may have one thing that takes 100 megabytes to undo, well, I can't take it out of sequence. So that
Fair
can
enough.
flush everything else out. But yeah, I agree. This is a different sort of scenario, and that makes sense.
Right. And also, I mean, I would worry about the, right now, recording the history is super simple and super fast. You just record it. And if we limit one size, okay, fine. You add one test. Okay, we see what the limit is. Now, if it's, by the total size of the history.
I know. So I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should do it by the added object. So we don't have to go.
Just byte count on the object. I assume that byte count is almost always really fast.
Yes.
And we
right,
yeah.
and then it becomes a failure object.
You might want to call it max history item size just to be clear, but max.
I agree. That makes sense.
Okay, suggestion from Elaine here: highlight cells in use. So I suspect that has to do with this thing about when you hover over a cell, lighting that up somehow, which is a thing that we have coming, right?
Yes. Although another variant of this, which I discussed or I intended to discuss, yes, I did, is that if you have an anchored percent,
I see.
mousing over the percent object would highlight the thing that it references to if it's on screen. If it's not on screen, it can bring up a tooltip.
Okay, there are two issues there. Okay, so this is highlighting of referenced cells. So there are two things. Number one would be when you hover over a percent, indicate which cell it refers to.
Yeah, and then the other is, it's a slam dunk to have a hyperlink in there. If it's off screen, that I can take you to that cell.
I see. Or hyperlink to jump to it. Okay, so there's a different thing, which is if you are the cell to which something is anchored, so indicate.
Yes, and
if you are a cell
reasonable.
that is acting as an anchor, how do you indicate that?
Well, I would put a widget on the cell bracket, and we're working on how to generalize those cell bracket widgets into a tray.
Okay, but so I mean, add an icon in the cell bracket probably.
Yeah.
And it might also be the case that, okay, so now the next question is, do you want any kind of warning if you're going to delete that cell?
Well, there are modes of deletion where you don't want the warning, but you could wiggle your way through it. You don't want the warning when you reevaluate it, right? Except, of course, you could reevaluate and then quit the kernel before the evaluation finishes. Actually, but in that case, it probably would still be there, because I guess we don't actually delete the old cell until new inputs start coming through.
Okay, but the question is, warning on deletion. It would be nice if there was a soft warning that did not in any way require sort of click through or anything like that. The problem is, by the time, if you say, well, actually, I didn't mean to do it, I guess you can always do undo. Yeah, why not?
You can always do undo.
Right, so it might as well just be a notifier, and then reverse it by doing undo.
Yeah.
That does seem like a useful thing, to put up a little notifier just saying this was anchored, this cell was used as an anchor. Because it'll be too late if you've done 25 other things. It'll be at least way confusing.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Total history. There's a bunch of comments about total history size. I think we've okay. There's a request that I evaluate memory available. Let's see what it does. Now I'm going to find out whether in fact I'm talking complete nonsense or not. What does that even mean? That's nothing. That's just 50 gigabytes. I wonder why it thinks I don't have more memory than that.
I don't know how memory available actually works.
Yeah, I don't know either. When it goes into swap space and things. Okay, that was a really lame. What is this doing with this weird thing where it's? Did you see that weird selection?
No, not quite.
Okay, well, that was unexciting. Okay, James here. Oh, that's interesting. So James suggests, like to be able to have a network tree of the cells with the various in-outs and be able to manipulate it. Well, that's an amusing idea. I mean, basically being able to make computable the percent, making the percent knitting computable.
So, well, I mean, the question is, what does he mean by network? One possibility is, I mean, we are keeping possibly what he's looking for internally for the predictive interface. I mean, we have to be able to indicate, the relationships between, input and output cells for things like roll-up and such. And so it's not externally exposed. Well, it is, but not in any documented way. I mean, the front end produces this information, and then lose code consume the information for implementing things like rollup.
Okay, so wait a minute. Ethan is suggesting as a killer feature, smarter rollup into a functional module creates named variables from intermediate percents. Yeah, one problem is what on earth should the names be? We have looked at various times sort of the machine learning approach to making names for things. I think it's super hard. It's like making up a product name or making up a word in a language. Like, what should you call that thing?
The easier version of that, which I would love to do, but I don't really know what a good interface for it is I already have a name in the code right there, but it's a global right now, and I want to turn it into a module variable.
I see what you're saying. So wait a minute. So okay, so auto modulating, so to speak. So what you're saying is, I say UU equals 5, and then I say UU squared, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I want to get out of this is something like with UU equals 55 UU squared. Yeah. Well, I mean, that seems like that is a roll up. I mean, okay, so hold on a second.
I mean, think about it when you're, I mean, an even simpler case is you're writing, say, a function that already has a module in it, and you realize you need to add a new variable. Well, what do you have to do? You have to go, and click in the module and add it there, and then click back where you were and keep typing. Or you have to, kind of keep track of all the things that you.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So what you're suggesting is a right click, for example. So if I go through here, blah 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 blah, plus Z plus whatever. I bet Christopher has an opinion about this. That you could go in the right click here and put that as a module variable in the nearest enclosing module.
Yeah, I don't know if right click is the right interface, but yes, that's the concept.
Why isn't right click the right interface? Or it could be as an auto suggest.
Well, I mean, for one thing, I mean, the two alternatives which I would suggest, one is that I might want to do something while I'm typing, so I don't even remove my hands from the keyboard. That's one possibility. Or the other possibility is that I might want to look at it from okay, let's look at that module list of variables. Can I click on something there and then have it show me anything internal to the module that I might want to add? Because there might be several variables.
Fine. Possibly an auto suggest either at the site of the variable or at the site of the or at the site of the variable list in the scoping construct.
Yeah.
By the way, another sort of extension of this is also just if you have an existing piece of code and you just want to wrap module around it, and then it maybe auto suggests filling in all of basically the blue symbols.
That's a good idea.
In the module.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, those two features can work in tandem. The one can be just kind of a superset of the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Given naked code.
I mean, there's some there's some like heuristics you need though, because for instance, right, like you don't know if there's some symbol that's defined on a like if the symbol is defined at the time that you're writing module around it.
Yes, it's probably local. It's probably global capture. It's probably capturing a global variable. Right. In other words, if t is already actually has a value.
Right. So I mean, the one heuristic might be that if I have some piece of code and I'm wrapping module around it, that you automatically suggest to localize all the variables that are not currently defined globally.
Yes.
But for example, if I ran that code before and then I realized, oh, whoops, I just made a bunch of global variables, let me wrap it in module.
Yes, that's right.
Then it won't suggest anything. So, I mean, the other argument is just to do all the variables that are defined, like everything that's on the left-hand side of set.
Well, I think I would say, just begin by wrapping module of empty lists around it, and then throw up the interface for the empty list and just let the user choose.
No, but I've got I think what Christopher is saying is a better idea to lexically look, lexically look in the scoped code for things that are on the left hand for L values, and suggest those, and suggest localizing those.
Sure.
That seems like a pretty straightforward heuristic.
And by the way, I think that heuristic is probably safer than the one that only looks at L values that are blue, right? Undefined L values. Right. Because I think that it's rare that you actually do that intentionally. You do it occasionally, but not often.
Right. That's a good idea. Should that be fed to the code assistance people, or is that something that would be directly?
No, no, it's a good question. I mean, it's the kind of transformation that they would like to do, but they're not yet in the business of building these kinds of interfaces.
Right. That is really a useful feature, I have to say. That would be very useful. I would have used this a zillion times. Can we just look at this auto rollup for a second and whether that's interesting as well? So this would be a thing where you would select a range of cells. So this is basically a roll up from a range of cells. I mean, that does seem reasonable. And if it uses %, you could you invent a variable name? What would you do? So in other words, in this case, it's clear what the rolled up expression should be.
I mean, you could do some like unique of n, where n is the number, like the out number, line number.
Well, except that you have to base it on an alphanumeric, on an alphabetic.
Yeah.
You could have some weird Unicode
well,
character.
you could start it with $1, right? You could have $N.
I would think it'd be better to have a Unicode character.
Could you not? I mean, this would be totally weird. But could you not have a localized version of out of n? I mean, right, like if you write out of n.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's interesting.
You just localize out.
Right. So you're saying, but you'd have to localize the whole of out.
No, but you use block or something, and localize just the down value, just out of n for the n's you care about. I mean, that would be kind of weird, but
does block do that?
Why not?
Sure. I mean, well, it would localize all of out, surely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Right.
Yeah. Oh.
And then okay, that's one bizarre idea. Another bizarre idea. Okay, for the % case, for % rollup, there's this.
Could you not use module though? By the way, I mean, I feel like you could probably localize just the things you care about for.
You mean this? Well, hold on. What are we talking about? I suspect you would want to use.
I assume is it possible to? I've never tried this with module. Is it possible to localize only particular down values? Right, like if I have out of lots of no,
okay, because it's lexical
symbol.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's lexical. So here for percent, I mean the biggest hack would be a Unicode character that looks like percent.
No.
Well,
that would be too horrific. I mean, especially when people copy, you copy the code out into an email or something, or who knows what, and then the percent turns into some /bracket secret percent or something.
Or worse, copies into a normal percent. So when you paste it back in, the code doesn't work.
Well, maybe there's a Unicode
Yeah.
character that would be preserved. Maybe we should look at the Unicode. Maybe there's some strange Korean character. Look, this almost looks like one of these Hangul things.
No, but see, it's like the there's the Greek question mark, right, which looks like a semicolon, and then all the compilers give errors. They say don't use a Greek semicolon or a Greek question mark, right? I mean, this is like what you're saying. This is an intentional Greek question mark.
Yes. Well, fair enough. That might not be the right way to, but maybe there is a Unicode character that would make sense. I mean, just because we just needs to base it on something that is, but look, I mean, the roll up here would be, I mean, this would certainly be a nice thing to be able to get something where the code, where it's auto creating kind of a transportable piece of code. All right, let's roll up this discussion. I think I think there are a bunch of pretty uncontroversial things here that are super interesting, that have to do with, as soon as you type percent, it has an auto suggest that asks you which version of percent you want.
Yeah.
And there probably has to be a keyboard way of getting that does not require going into the autocompleter. So there's sort of a question of whether we want some kind of, well, maybe we just want a keyboard shortcut. Yeah, I mean, maybe we want Iconize to have a keyboard short. Does Iconize have a keyboard shortcut?
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to Control Command quote.
Why doesn't it say that here? Why does it not give keyboard shortcuts in the right-click menu?
Because right-click menus don't have keyboard shortcuts.
Why?
Because that's the standard.
It is.
Or at least
It's not every app does it that way, but more apps do it that way than not.
But maybe that's just some Apple user interface guideline that somebody forgot to change.
But it's also the case.
Steve never believed in having more than one button on a mouse.
Yeah, well, it's also the case that I have I mean, the only way to populate it right now is to manually label those things, and I have a concern about those labels getting out of sync if a shortcut changes, which means now
that's a build issue. But yeah,
which means now we have to write code to have it figure out what it is and populate that label, and it's yeah.
All right. So listen, going forward here. So is there stuff to implement here? I think there is.
Well, so I mean, I would like to tighten up the interface. I mean, we haven't made, and we're not going to do so today, obviously, but we haven't made hard decisions about how do we not present 4 choices to the user whenever they type percent. I really don't want to present 4 choices to the user.
No, I agree, and I think that these things here probably should be a keyboard. There should at least be a keyboard shortcut. You type percent and then you type something that is some keyboard shortcut that type percent command V or something. Well, that's not going to work, but
speaking of which, one other possibility that's toward the bottom of the notebook is we could have customized keyboard alias around percent.
I know, I'm not so keen on that. That's a big nuisance, and the escape key is escaping from many keyboards. I mean, like for example,
no, it's coming back.
They brought it back.
Did they bring it back on?
They did. Yes, they did.
You mean it's a hard key now?
Yes.
Even when it has that soft what's that
touch
thing?
bar?
Touch bar. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why.
I mean, really, the way that we use the escape key is a little strange, but the usage of the escape key is just so universal in so many applications that, yeah, it was a problem for them. So.
Right. I mean, I always find it a bit inconvenient to type the escape, but I agree that we could have. I don't know. I don't know. I would prefer to see a command key.
Well, so I mean, the escape key thing is one way in which it helps is it's an escape hatch if you want to do something that is possible but not on the happy path.
Right, I agree. But so look, I've got one suggestion, okay, which is generalized Command L. Okay, so my concept would be one of the generalizations is pull down an iconized version. Right. So in other words, right now, if I do Command L, I'm going to get, well, whatever. Let me do a better one. Okay, so now I do Command. Well, if I do Command L, I get that. If I do Command, why not let me get with a modifier Option Command L, for example, brings in an iconized version of that, for example, or perhaps. I mean, it's going to get a little weird, but for this, right?
Well, or alternatively, bringing in the iconized version might be the default. And I mean, it's easy to uniconize if that's what you.
Well, so you're saying Command Shift L could bring in the iconized version by default?
No. We don't want to do that. Because ultimately we'd like to support Command L cycling. And Command Shift L is the obvious inverse of Command L.
Right. Okay. So wait a minute. First thing is Command L cycling, which is clearly a great idea. Definitely to be implemented. Definitely to do. Okay. So that means Command Shift L then becomes the back cycler.
Exactly.
So then we need a new thing. So I would claim then that the correct way to do it is, okay, so for input cells, Command L cycling and then Command Shift L to go backwards.
So then we're going to steal Command Shift L?
Yes, but I think that won't be a tragedy because I think that copy output from above is used. I mean, in comparison to copy input from above, I think copy input from above is at least 10 times more popular, if not 100 times more popular.
Okay, well, certainly not 100 times more popular for me.
Okay, so I've got a suggestion here for the output cells.
But we can find another shortcut for it.
Well, we needed the shortcut, but the idea would be that instead of using percent and getting the auto suggest that brings you the iconized expression, have the new Command Shift L bring down the output expression as iconized.
Yeah.
I actually really rather like that idea. I mean, because the times when I use, I mean, clearly you can uniconize it, but that would be maybe with a modifier it's uniconized, but to bring it down iconized by default, that would give us, that would then, sort of it's a discovery interface to have percent have an auto suggest, but this is the, for the more experienced user, this is probably what they would do.
Yeah.
We have one comment here. From SWSH, there's no code assistant features except autocompletion. Well, actually, there's a big group working on code assistants, and maybe we'll do a live stream and talk about what they've been doing. It's pretty elaborate stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Sander is and Hans here are offering suggestions for what that Unicode non-percent might be.
And, but then he says, but don't do that.
Yeah, right. The Unicode FF05. Right. Okay, we'll just record that as a bad idea up here. Okay. Well, great. All right, we should wrap this up. And thank you, everybody here, and thank you to people on the live stream. People might be interested at the top of the next hour. I am doing a completely different live stream about the 1-month update on the state of the physics project. But now I need to go get some lunch. Thanks. Okay.
Me too.
See you guys. Thanks a lot. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.